Okay, so hello, my name is Kyle, and this is my Unity mini lab for creating the fireworks. Okay, so this is how my fireworks look like. Let's zoom out. Okay, that's what it looks like. And if we zoom in, we can see even more. There you go. Okay, so this project starts right here in the Projects tab. So to create particles, we're going to go to the plus to create something, and then we're going to go to Visual Effects right there, and then we're going to click Visual Effects Graph, and then it's going to create something like this, right? And that highlights it right there. And then after that, if we want to use GPU triggers, which are the trigger events, we are going to go to Preferences, Visual Effects, and we're going to make sure that's marked right there. And again, that's so we can use the GPU triggers. Okay, so again, that's what that looks like. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the visual effects graph. And if this wasn't open, the way you would access that is by clicking Fireworks2 twice, and then it should open up the visual effects graph right there. Okay, so we are going to start off at the spawn part of the graph, right? Okay, so this spawn is a spawn event, and it's responsible for creating particles per second. So it has the property constant spawn rate, and I set it to 1 because I only want one. I only want one particle being spawned per second. So if I increase this to 20, for example, it's gonna create 20 particles per second. Alright, so we're gonna change that back to 1. Alright, so then now it's gonna be less. Okay. So now we're gonna move on to initialize particle. Right there, so we see we have set velocity random, set lifetime random, and set position. So set velocity random, this sets right there, right? So do you see right there where it stops and when it ends? So that has everything to do with this, and also the speed, of course. So if we change this to, say, 30, it's going to go significantly higher, and also faster as well. Sometimes, right? See right there, so that's still like relatively slow. But if we increase this like 20, it's obviously they're all gonna go higher, right there, and faster as well. So let's put that back. Maybe we'll just leave it 15, 20. Okay. So and the random, it's also random, meaning that's why you see the variety. That's why you see the variation, because it's not fixed. The velocity isn't fixed, so it's not like they're all going to be shooting at the same height, you know. So next we have set lifetime random. This is the lifetime of the particle. So right now, do you see how they disappear? That has everything to do with this. So for example, say I did 20, 23. It's gonna last forever. See, do you see it's not dead yet? And then it's gonna go even beyond that. It's gonna go all the way down, all the way even past x equals 0 and z equals 0, the coordinate system. So that, again, this is basically just saying that's how long a particle exists, right? So we're going to set that back to 1.2. And again, similar to the previous one, this one is random, meaning that it's going to pick a random range from 1 to 1.2. So different particles will have a different lifetime within this range. Okay, so next we have set position. So set position is where the particles are shooting out. It has everything to do with where the particles are shooting out from. So I chose a box. And actually, in my report, I actually explained this. Okay, right here, let's check this out. Actually, I'm not sure if you can see this, but the idea is, if you can imagine a three-dimensional cube, the surface area of that cube is where the particles will shoot out from. We can also do a set position with a line, and if it's a line, it's going to be like particles will be shooting out of a line, basically. And if we fail to provide a set position, it's it's going to be shooting out like from the particles will be shooting out from a single coordinate within the entire world, right, and within the scene. And so for this one, I chose a box because there's dimension to it, and yes, that's why. Okay, and then right here we change the sides. So I wanted it to be a cube 5 by 5 by 5. Alright, so next we have update particle. So update particle is this particle. This section is called for every single frame. Okay, so the first one is gravity. So I wanted it to look realistic, and without gravity, it's just gonna keep going upwards and upwards and upwards. So for example, if we put like 0, or no, maybe we'll put, that's just gravity. Cool. Alright, so that's just gravity. Gravity pulls it down, like that way it's realistic, basically. Okay, so next we have trigger event on die. This is a GPU trigger event that's triggered once a particle dies. And so once a particle dies, it's gonna extend to this branch, and it's gonna carry out whatever this branch says to carry out. And this next trigger event is trigger event on always, which means that for every time that this updates, which is every frame, it will trigger this event, right? And so that when this event is triggered, it's going to carry out everything in this tree, and in this branch. And we'll go more into that later. So next we have output particle quad, and that's essentially just how the particle for this specific one, right? For this specific branch, or for this specific tree, right? So excluding these. So for this one, I changed this one, the texture, so that's how it looks. You can make them look like cubes, you can make them look like anything. You can make them look like anything here, and so I chose that one. Alright, so then next I set color. So this is a fixed color, meaning that all the ones that are being shot are going to be red of this color. And then I also brought the intensity up. That way it's like bright, vivid, and shiny. Okay, so next we have set size, and set size is a fixed size of 0.6. So if we make this bigger, it's going to look like a giant circle. So if we change it to 2.6, that's what it's going to look like. Or if we change it to even bigger, like 26, it's going to be even bigger. And so that's that. I forgot what I said. Let's put it back to 0.5. Yeah, okay. So that's what that does. Okay, so now we are going into the trigger event. So the first one we're going to go look at is event onto die. So this is when the particles die, right? And that's after their lifetime expires. So on die, it's gonna trigger a spawn event, right? Right there. And then this is what's gonna happen. So it's gonna initialize. So once the particle dies, let's see that there. Once a particle dies, we want that explosion. See, do you see this is coming up and then it explodes, right? So this is coming up, it explodes. This one comes up, it explodes, right? So this is what we want. So as you can see, like one particle shoots up and then it bursts into a lot of different particles. So that's what we're going for. Okay, so for all those particles that happen, like the eruption, we want them to have a lifetime of 1 to 1.8, right? And as we saw earlier, if we make this right here longer, these particles are gonna last for a long time, and it's gonna last so long that it might even start falling below the grid, right? Below the grid. And so as you notice, this is a set lifetime. It says random, so unlike the first one we saw, this one is going to be given a range, and so particles can have varying lifetimes, right? As long as it's within this range. Next we have inherit source position, and this is basically saying we want the position of this event. We want this event to happen right where the particle dies, right? So it's like we don't want it to happen, you know, we don't want this bursting event to happen like somewhere else. So like for example, like right there, right? We want it to happen right where the particle burst. And so that's what that means. Next we have add velocity from direction and speed, random, right? Okay, so this is basically the speed, right, as right there, min speed, max speed. So yeah, that's how fast that's going. Okay, cool. So next we have update particle. So again, we just have gravity. I don't even think that's necessary actually. Let's see what happens when we turn that off. No, okay, yeah, see, that's necessary. See, do you see how without the gravity, it just like flies upwards? Alright, so let's put gravity back on. Okay, so moving on, we have the output particle quad, which is basically how the particles from this specific branch looks, right? Okay, so we are going to start off right here with set size random. So again, this sets the size of our particles. This is random, so it's not, we're not giving all of the exploding particles right there. Do you see how they explode? We're not giving all the exploding particles the same size, so we're giving it a range of sizes that it can pick from, and it's going to be random, right? So for example, let's set 0.5 to 50. No, maybe not 50, to 10. Maybe not 10. Let's set it to 6. Maybe not. Let's set it to 2. Okay. So notice how in the explosion, on top of having the big particles of size 2, there's also the tiny ones, and that's because it's given a range that, so it can be any size within this range. That's basically what that means. Okay. Then we have set color random. So this, do you notice how when it's shooting up its own, no, right there, the head of the particles that are shooting up, it's always going to be red, but notice how in the explosion we see red, we see yellow, and we see like a gradient of those, right? So that is allowed with this property right here. It's set color random from gradient. So basically what that looks like is that. Okay, so this top part represents the opaqueness, like, you know, the transparency. So when it's when the particles are, like, you know, from bursting to being killed off and disappearing, so I want it at the initial bursting, I want it to be really vivid, to be really opaque, to be, you know, like a solid color, right? You can't see through it. But then as it approaches it's the end of its lifetime, as it approaches death, I want it to start fading and to be transparent, right? I don't want it to just like disappear. And I want it to be that represents the color, and the top represents the transparency. So for the color, I wanted it to be reds, arranged from reds to yellows. That's, yeah, reds to yellows. I was thinking of reds to orange, except orange is very similar, that it's almost unnoticeable, so I went with yellow. And also, the Unity tutorial used reds and yellows, so that's what I went for too. And like I said, it's random, set color random, so it's random. It can be any color within this range. Okay, and that concludes on die, trigger on die. So now we're going to move to trigger on always. So this is being called every time a new frame gets basically that new frame. Okay. So then, again, similar to every other branch, it starts off with a spawn event. So then we have initialized particle. Okay, so capacity, okay, so first of all, on always, this is more about, do you see how when it shoots up, there's a They're particles that are chasing after it. So that's what that is, the capacity. So for example, if we set it to 1, it shouldn't, or maybe it will. Oh, I'm thinking about speed, I think. Alright, so let's think about this for a second. Why does it look the same? There it is. Okay, that's what. Okay, so I was right. So that's what I'm looking for. So do you notice how when we put 1, it's just a single. There's nothing trailing behind it like we saw earlier. So again, let's put that back at 1,000 because that looks weird. Alright, so let's put that back at 1,000. So now that looks like something shooting up and then exploding, right? That's the type of look we're going for, versus what we just saw earlier when we set it to 1. Okay, so now we have set lifetime. Set lifetime is the same. It's basically how long the particle is going to last. And in this case, we're not talking about the particles from the explosion. We're not talking about the head of the shooting star, if you want to call it that. We're talking about the trail right there, right? We're talking about those particles. So I decided to make them last 0.3. Next, we have inherent source position. We saw that earlier. But we're basically saying that we want the particles to start right where. How do I explain this? Basically, we're saying that. See, this is complicated because, right? Okay, for the explosion, once the particle at least with the other one with the trigger on die, it's clear where the particle dies, right? It dies at a fixed point, and then we can cause an explosion right there. But since this one is moving, it's basically like at the same spot, right? But since it's happening every frame, it's almost like it's at the that's what gives it the trailing behind. It's basically okay. I will try to explain it more in better terminology in my report. We're going to move on to add velocity from direction and speed. So speed mode is going to be constant. So this one is also random. So this is just our speed. Oh no, see, okay. See, if you remember earlier, when speed was random, we gave it a minimum speed and a maximum speed. Can we find that? Right there. Okay. Right there. So this one isn't a random velocity. This is just random direction. Nope. Yeah, random direction. Okay. So then that gives it the speed of what's trailing behind it. Yeah, so let's see what happens when we change it from 0.2 to 4. It bursts like that. Okay. How about if we change it to 40? Okay. So let's just put that back at 0.2. It drags it out behind. It drags out that trailing aspect behind it. Okay. So next we have update particle. Now, in every other update particle we use gravity, but for this one we didn't, and the reason is because we want it to trail behind it, so there's no gravity at play, because we're going upwards. And that's why we're not using gravity. We don't want to pull it down. We want it to go all the way up until the burst, basically. So we don't want anything pulling it down. Next we have the output particle quad. Again, that's just how the particles look. Okay, so again we have set size random, and this sets the particles to varying sizes. And again, when we're talking about the particles, we aren't talking about the particles in the explosion. We aren't talking about the head of that trailing thing. We are talking about the particles that are following that initial shooting thing. Right. So if you notice, there are varying sizes. Maybe you won't notice because 0.1 is very small and 0.05 is very small, is much smaller. but there is a difference. Alright. And lastly, we have set color random from gradient. And again, the color is going to be random within this gradient. It's going to be red, yellow. In fact, can we change the color? Okay, let's change the color to purple. Yeah, that looks nice. Okay. And so that's what that does. So right now, most of them look purple. However, oh, let's change this one as well. Let's change this, that way it's more noticeable. Let's say green. Yeah, green looks nice. Okay. So some should be purple, some should be green. Can we see it? Yeah, you can see that a bit. Okay. And so basically that's what that does. And that concludes our tree.